Hey, Olivia, welcome to the Focus on Winning podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Olivia, you have, I'm really interested in your work. You have a podcast group. You also have a podcast. Teach people how to podcast, and it seems to me that you are really passionate about all things podcasting. So, I really want to know why are you so passionate about podcasting?
Oh, I actually haven't been asked that before, so that's a really good question. So thank you for
Oh
asking
wow.
that. Yeah, it's never been that question. It's always like, how do I build it? How do I do this? And I'm like, okay, cool, let's go. So why do I love it? So I actually had a phone call today with a woman that found me through another podcast, and I was talking about how it works really well for introverts. So even though I might seem like an extrovert, I'm actually more of an introvert. And so
Mm,
back when I wanted to get my content out into the world, I wanted to contribute, I wanted to, share my lessons and my insights and knowledge and all these things that I'd been through back like 2 years ago. I actually first started my YouTube channel, and that was
oh.
great for about 3 videos. And then I realized just how much work it actually was for me personally, not necessarily for everyone, but for me, it just felt like a lot of work. And I didn't particularly love being on camera. And I thought, oh, if I want to get my content out there every week, do I have the energy to show up every week on camera, if not more? And being a woman as well, there's a lot more work like makeup and making sure your hair was freshly washed. And I had to reconfigure my room to accommodate the camera and have my script ready to go. And it just felt really unnatural for me. And I had to do it all in the morning when the sunlight was at the highest. And I just kind of started to get burnt out from it. And I was like, I just don't think I can sustain this level of commitment. And I was like, okay, cool. So I still have this juicy stuff I want to get out there. How do I get it out there into the world? Like, how do I create content that resonates with people with more than just like some text on a screen with a photo? And I was like, oh, podcasting. Because I was listening to podcasts back then. I was consuming so many different episodes and loving it and just really enjoying the whole process of being a listener, basically. And then one day I had
Mhm.
this thought and I was like, why don't I do a podcast? Like, it can't be that hard. And so then that's when the whole thing kind of started, just with that one thought. And the reason why I love podcasting is because it can be really easy if you make it easy for yourself. And that's the thing that I'm all about, making it easy, flowy, and sustainable so you can integrate it into your lifestyle and your business easily. And I think too, it's like, so for me as a podcaster, I preferred it than being on video and creating YouTube videos every day or every week. So it was just better for me personally. And also being more of an introvert, it was great because I could just show up in my pajamas and no one would know. I could show up with no makeup on, looking like a mess, coffee
Yeah.
in hand, ready to go. And it just made life great. The other thing too is like podcasts have changed my life. Like they really have altered the trajectory of my life, obviously, because now I'm a podcast coach and consultant and stuff, and an entrepreneur and a business owner, and that would never have happened if it wasn't for podcasts, truly.
Mhm.
It's also helped me think very differently and make changes in my life and make me feel like I wasn't alone with certain things going on in my own personal life. And I guess that's probably the main two reasons why I love podcasting so much. And it's given back to, like, podcasting has given back to me in such a beautiful way as well. Like, yes, I've showed up and I've poured, myself into my podcast and worn my heart on my sleeve and shared some vulnerable stories and things that can make you feel a little bit exposed at times. But it's been like this beautiful two-way relationship where like I show up and put my stuff out there and somehow things come back to me. And in a sense, I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but it is a little bit magical because if I didn't show up and put myself out there, those things wouldn't have ever found me. And that includes things like, one-to-one clients and, interviews that have just literally fallen into my lap out of nowhere. In fact, the phone call I had today was with someone that just found me out of nowhere on another podcast and I'd never heard from her before. So we got chatting and we're like,
Mm,
hey, let's jump on the phone. So
mhm.
yeah, like they're probably the main three reasons.
Mm. Okay, so you like to teach people, right? That because you first started off with YouTube channel, and then you feel like, okay, what if I start a podcast because you don't have to be on camera?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of myself too because I also don't want to be on camera, and that's why and we kind of have a similar reason actually
Yeah,
for
I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great benefit of podcasting because not everyone wants to be physically seen all the time. And, if anyone does follow my social media, they'll know that they have seen me on Instagram stories and doing Facebook Lives and stuff. But it doesn't have to be to the level of professionalism like a YouTube channel needs to be for the most part for it to be good quality.
Mm.
And I can just do that when I feel like it. There's no pressure for me to have to show up and do a YouTube video. I just do it when I want to, very much like podcasting actually, but it's just a lot easier. So I think it really is a great option for a lot of introverts or people that aren't comfortable on camera. And I should say, by the way, if you are video podcasting, excellent choice and excellent idea. For sure, it's definitely going to help build that know, like, and trust with your audience and potential listeners a whole lot quicker and a whole lot better. But I think it's a really great option for introverts or people that don't want to be seen every day on camera.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I asked in the one of the podcasting group, I asked, hey, people, what really inspired you to start a podcast? And there's a lot of this, I got like 200 comments on that post. And although there
Nice.
are a lot of, although there are a lot of reasons, there is one common thing that they have. It's actually two. One is because they are introvert, and another one is because they want to teach something. So
Yes.
yeah, I guess
Totally.
that's a lot of common things in podcasters.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like when you think about, podcasting or any sort of medium, a lot of it is teaching. Do you know what I mean? Like it's sharing, it's teaching, it's storytelling. I love teaching. I actually wanted to be a teacher
Mm.
years and years and years ago, but I didn't follow that path, which I'm actually grateful for now because I don't think I would have been suited for it in that particular way that I was going to do it. But I love teaching, and I love the combination of life coaching because I'm a certified life coach as well. So I do love that coaching aspect. But the great thing about podcasting is you can show up and showcase, your stories and your lessons and your experiences and even your skills and expertise, and the right people will find you.
Yeah, that's right. And I checked on your podcast before, and I scroll all the way down to your first episode. And you know what I found? I found that you changed the name of your podcast many times. And
Many times.
it was first it was about, I think it was narcissist something, and then it was about hustle thingy, and then so why do you change it so many times?
Great question. So I have actually rebranded my podcast 4 times, which I
Ooh.
know is a lot. Tell me about it. So basically, back in 2018, I finally launched my podcast. So the very first one. And that was called Overcoming Narcissistic Relationships with Olivia. And just a side note, please, no one name a podcast that friggin' long. It's too much to remember. People won't remember it. It's not short, snappy, or smart. But anyway, so you live and you learn. I've made mistakes along the way and I've only gotten better from that, thank goodness. But yeah, my first podcast was basically to help predominantly codependent women recover and heal after toxic love and toxic relationships, toxic marriages, toxic dating, because I personally had been through all of that and, had worked on myself a lot, that I felt I was in a really healthy place where I could actually, provide insights and help other women up level around the world. But of course, I only started off with one soul initially because I had no idea it was going to get this big, this quick. Anyway, so I started off in that and I loved it. And I did that for about 12 months. And I started my podcast before my business. And that's how I attracted the clients, that reached out to me and they wanted to work with me. And it all just kind of it just beautifully kind of unfolded the way it was meant to. And after about 12 months, I just started to feel really, because working in that space, there's a lot of, mistreatment, abuse, neglect, all of these things. It was really quite heavy and there was lots of different mental illnesses that came into it. And I just remember thinking, I don't think I have the energy to stay in this space when I've done so much healing and recovery. I was ready to keep going on that path and not keep looking back all the time. And so I just found that as much as I loved the women that I was catering for and speaking to and teaching, I just felt like energetically it wasn't the right match for me long term. And so then I switched into business coaching. So at this point in time, I'd had my certification come through for life coaching. And I was like, okay, cool. I've built a business now. I know how to make consistent income. I know how to help people. I've got my coaching skills underway. I've got my coaching hours logged. I was getting all this experience and I was like, cool, what am I going to do then? Like, if I want to move out of relationship coaching and relationship podcasting, what's next for me? And I've always felt really drawn to entrepreneurialism and business and all that sort of stuff way back when, before I even had a podcast, because I was looking for that financial freedom and I knew I wasn't going to get that in my full-time job at the time, which is how that also impacted my life, because of listening to podcasts, I started a business and stuff. Anyway, long story short, I could go on for ages. Business coaching was great. I loved it. I was having success with that. My business was, scaling and building even more. And I got to a point where I was like, holy crap, I don't think business coaching feels totally right for me now either, and I was like, crap, do you know what I mean? Like, what now? Because I just wanted to stick with one thing and build that up and be known for that thing. And anyway, I realized, like, in the business industry, there's so many different business coaches, and I really didn't know what my point of difference was in the market, because there's like thousands of them. And I was like, okay, what have I done? What do I love doing all the time? And what have I done that's been consistent all the way through? And it turned out it was podcasting. And, as I was looking at the stats, it was showing that, podcasting was becoming more and more popular. It was building every year. It was getting really consistent. It was starting to get hot and trendy. Every woman and a cat and man and his dog had a podcast. And I was like, maybe I should be focusing on this. There's not a lot of people working in this space yet. Not like YouTube, where you've got YouTube coaches and teachers around YouTube and they've got YouTube channels. I was like, oh, podcasting, this is like one of my hugest passions. And so then I niched down into podcasting, and that's how I got here. So I've gone from overcoming narcissistic relationships to, the Red Velvet Woman was the first one. By the way, don't name your podcast something that doesn't make any sense and people won't understand. Another mistake. That was the first one. Overcoming narcissistic relationships, slaying your side hustle, because I was a side hustler at the time, helping other side hustlers, elevate and do well in their businesses. And then now it's become a podcast queen.
Yeah.
So
wow. That was a really crazy journey right there. I mean, of course, you are trying to find your voice right at the start of your journey. But it's good. But it seems that you changed from one niche to another niche, because there are two completely different niche. Relationship and entrepreneurial. So props to you for making it work. So
thank you so much. Yeah, totally different niches. And I think that's the other thing too. Like, I think a good lesson for podcasters and people in general is, like, you don't have to stick with one thing forever. If it's not lighting you up, if it doesn't feel aligned anymore, that's okay. Follow the fire inside of you. Follow what you're interested in. Follow what you could talk about endlessly. What could you talk about, like, to no end? Do you know what I mean? Like, that you could just keep showing up and you enjoy talking about, that really lights you up. And as you grow and evolve, your podcast will as well. And I think it's just good for people to know that.
Yeah, I agree on that. And you mentioned that podcast has changed your life. So what podcast has done to your life?
Well, the very first podcast I ever listened to was called Style Your Mind by Cara Elwill. And I actually found her through Instagram. I was watching an Instagram story, 4 years ago, I think it was, when I was working in network marketing. So I was working full-time shift work as a registered nurse and midwife. And I just started this business after my breakup to kind of sink my teeth into something, to kind of, focus on something else and build something that I wanted for myself that I could help other people with. So I started a makeup and skincare business, and we call them crown princesses. It's basically someone really, really ranked highly in the company. She was sharing this book that she was reading. And when I looked up the book, because I was like, gosh, if she's learning that, I need to learn that, because I wanted to get to her level of success and stuff. And so I was looked at the book, looked up the lady who was the author, who was Cara Elwill. She had a podcast, and I was like, I just wanted to connect with her a little bit more than just buy a book from a stranger. And that's when I was like, I'll just listen to the podcast, because it's free. So like, all right. So I listened to the first episode, and it was like, whoa, oh, this is cool. I like this. This is interesting. And then I downloaded the next episode, and then the next and the next. And before I knew it, I'd binged hours upon hours of listening to her to and from work, like commuting in the car. Yeah. And Cara was a certified life coach, and she was a podcaster. And I think that was when I really kind of thought, oh my God, what's a life coach? I could be a life coach. Do you know what I mean? Because I was looking for answers to try and start a business that worked for me, if that makes sense. And so after I, was binging her episodes and falling in love with her content, like, I just felt like she understood me. She had never met me, didn't know who the hell I was, because I was like on the other side of the world. But I was like, Oh my gosh, she gets me. So I didn't feel alone because I was having these thoughts like maybe I shouldn't just be a worker or an employee. Like I want to have an uncapped income. I want to be able to travel the world with my work. I don't want to have to apply for annual leave. And all these things were going on in my mind. And she was touching on all of those. And I was like, whoa, someone else like out there has got the success that I really want. And so, yeah, so that kind of planted the seed for starting my own podcast. And after I listened to her podcast, I went up and signed up to the Life Coaching College in Sydney, Australia, and got
Mm,
certified. And so that kind of really started the whole different direction of my life, to be honest with you. And
wow.
then since then, yeah, created the business and all of these things have happened. And it's just been an incredible journey. So, yeah, podcasting has 100% changed my life.
Okay. Honestly, there was too much going on in my mind. I tried to, comprehend everything right now. But yeah. So okay. So let me get it straight. It changed your life based on the relationship and business, right? Okay. That was quite awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So yeah. What's next after this? After you create your podcast, and then I mean, what's next after that?
Yeah. Well, some people get a little bit scared to say what they actually want and dream for and are working towards because they're like, crap, what if it doesn't happen? Then I've just embarrassed myself. But something that's been working well for me is like if I share it and I speak my dreams to people and speak it into existence, it just starts to happen a lot quicker. So I'm just going to share with you some of my plans and what I'm going to do over this Christmas and New Year's break, because I'm taking 2 weeks away from business and podcasting, is I
Mm,
just want to kind of like sit back, take myself out of the day-to-day tasks and stuff like that and just allow myself to have any ideas and drop-ins that I'm, wanting to receive basically about the future. But one of my 2 biggest long-term goals, I'll give you my long-term goals and then some of my short-term goals. And, maybe in a year's time, I'll look back on this and go, whoa, that happened. And maybe that didn't, whatever. Um, but what my long-term vision and goal is like the whole reason why I'm in podcasting at the moment is because I actually really want to help other people, start their podcast for whatever reason it is that works for them so that they can have a voice, so that they can step up and rise up and help educate the world on important things, to make the world a better place, of course, like so in a positive way.
mm.
And to do that, I'd love to eventually sign up with a podcast agency. I've had a couple of people pitch me now. I'm just kind of looking at my options and decide which way I want to go, because I do want to be a guest, every week or every fortnight on new, podcasts and stuff like that. So I'm looking at signing up with one of those. The other thing I want to do as well is, what was it? I basically want to interview some more high-profile people, because I have interviewed celebrities and TV reality stars and stuff like that in the past, but I'm wanting to kind of go even more into that space to share their story as well. And my shorter goals are things like setting up my website, because I really am dying to have a physical product. As much as I love having digital programs and services,
Mm.
I love selling actual things. And so I've got something in the works right now that I'm collaborating with someone. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so that's
Okay.
one of my plans. Yep.
So it's a physical product.
Yeah, a physical
You're
product.
working on
I'd
it.
love.
Oh, okay. Physical
Well,
product. What was it? Can
well,
you
I'm
give me a
actually.
clue or?
Well, yes, I have it here. It's just not official yet, but basically, I'm wanting
Ah,
to provide throat chakra oil. So even though I'm all about podcasting and I love everything about podcasting and strategy and all that sort of jazz, I'm also all about being a life coach too, of mindset and energy. And I'm actually wearing throat
mm.
chakra oil right now. I don't know if you can see it, if it's glowing or shiny.
Oh, okay. I
Um,
can see that. Yeah.
yeah, so basically
Yeah, I can
using
see it
essential
glowing.
oils. Yeah,
Ah.
probably just on my chest. Yeah, so I want to provide that. I also I have a mug line coming out with things saying like speak your truth and, all these sort of things that are going on that I want to provide. I also want to provide microphones too, because a lot of new podcasters or aspiring podcasters or wannabe podcasters are like, well, what equipment do I buy? So I just want to have
Mm.
like a one-stop shop that they can go, yep, cool. This is a beginner podcast microphone. This is an intermediate. This is an expert microphone. And just basically provide all the answers that people need or want and be that resource for them. And there's so much more that I could go into, but that's kind of a good starting place.
Okay. That's the long-term goal, right? Where you want to
Yes.
build a website where it's a one-stop shop. You said okay.
Yeah.
So there is a mic and the oil thing
Yes.
and
Throat
the
chakra.
everything every tools that a beginner's podcaster needs. Okay, so
Absolutely.
that's your long-term goal. So what about your short-term goal?
Well, actually, they were my short-term goals.
Oh wait,
So
what?
my long-term, so I want to have all that stuff happening in the next couple of months, as I go into 2021. So my long-term goal is to actually start getting onto stages. So I was, once again,
Wow.
through the power of podcasting, I attracted a speaking gig in Sydney that was supposed to be face-to-face and live in front of thousands, and it was actually going to be nationally advertised, but because of COVID, we've had to basically delay that. And yeah, so I'm not quite sure exactly when that's going to happen. But I'm wanting to basically sharpen my speaking skills so I can get onto stages and empower others and inspire them. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, at the end of the day, I'm just a 30-year-old Aussie that started a podcast in my bedroom 2 years ago, and
Mhm,
all of this
mhm.
stuff has happened for me. And everyone's special in their own way, but I'm also not that much more special than anyone else that they can't do it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I just want to get that message out there, and that, being consistent and showing up and nurturing your energy is what really will actually set you up for long-term success with your podcast.
Yeah, so I want to highlight this, okay, because you said you were an introvert before, and now after 3 years of podcasting, you have become really brave to face in front of people. So and now you want to speak on stage. Okay, that was a huge transformation there.
Yeah, well, it's actually been 2 years podcasting, not three, but next year will be
Oh,
three.
okay.
Um, yeah, well, I'm still an introvert though. So even though I think there's this misconception where it's like if you're an introvert, then you can't speak and you can't speak up and you can't be seen. And it's actually not true. Like, introvert just means that you recharge your batteries alone, or you have
Mm,
downtime to actually recharge and get re-energized. Whereas extroverts, they need to be around people and they like to bounce off that busy energy and others and absorb that energy, and that refuels them. I'm just not one of those people. So
okay.
yeah, I think podcasting has actually made me more confident as well, because I have a half brother that stutters really badly. I haven't had a lot of experience in front of stages before. Do you know what I mean? Like, I used to get nervous speaking. I used to be religious and I used to be in a church and I used to freak out every time I had to go on stage. I hated delivering oral presentations in my uni class. All of these things are things that I kind of struggled with. And public speaking I didn't enjoy. Whereas now, because I've got that higher mission and this purpose and this quest that I'm going on, it's like you build up that experience and those resources, and you expand your comfort zone, so that now that when I rock up for a podcast episode, I no longer feel like I want to wet myself out of fear. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
look forward to it. Back in the day when I was getting interviewed by someone, I would freak out before we would jump on, because I'm like, shit, what if it doesn't go well? What if they ask me the wrong question? What if I don't know the answer? What's going to happen? Are they going to think I'm dumb? Like, all of these things would happen. And now it's like, it's nearly as easy as breathing. Like, but it's because I've been doing it for 2 years now.
Yeah, yeah, that's really inspiring to me actually.
Oh,
I mean, I also feel scared whenever someone interviewed me. So seeing you getting brave really inspired me that much. So thank you for
oh,
that.
thank you. Oh, thank you for saying that. That's so lovely to say. And it's purely just exposure and practice. Like, the more you do it, the more secondhand it becomes. It's like driving a car. Like, I remember the first time I went to drive a car, I was a teenager and I was like, I can do this. It'll be easy. Do you know what I mean? But it's like there was more to
Mm,
think about than what I initially thought. And then I was like, oh, I'm not an expert at this yet. Damn it. I was like, I'm a novice. And then the more I started to drive, the easier it got. And now you hop in the car without even having to think about adjusting the mirror or turning the car on or sitting your seat up the right way or anything like that. You just go in, you do it, it's done, you finish, you're back at home. And podcasting is the
mhm.
same eventually.
Wow, that's nice analogy right there. Okay, so I think we can go into the topic. So as you know, we are going to talk about how to grow a podcast into $15,000 per month. Well, actually, I didn't. I don't know the right title that, but basically, how to grow a podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
So firstly, growing a podcast and downloads is one of the things to measure in podcast success, because as YouTube, the only way to measure is through subscribers and views, but in podcast, download is really crucial amongst podcasters. So
Mm.
firstly, I want to know the mistakes people do when growing a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I think the first one is probably being too obsessed with their downloads. This is something I did. I used to check it like every day, a couple of times a day. I'd be like, how many more downloads have I got in these last few hours? I started to become a little bit obsessive with it.
Okay,
um,
okay.
which I think can happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're like, come on already.
Yeah,
I'm putting my time and effort and focus into this thing. I want to reach
yeah.
as many people as I can. Like, how long does that freaking take? You know, like I had moments like that along my journey. I'll be completely honest about that.
Okay.
um, I think the problem with that, though, is when you focus too heavily on the downloads, you forget that you're actually reaching heartbeats. You know, like you're actually
Mm,
reaching real humans at the end of, like at the other end, you know, on their smartphones or on their computers or whatever it is. And we can get so obsessed with like the numbers and the analytics and the statistics and all of that. And at the end of the day, it's just a number. And I think too, something that I really realized was, you know, in business, one way that they measure success is how much money you make. But, you know,
mm,
after being at events like with Tony Robbins and, you know, really high level people like this, he talks about how there's multimillionaires out there and they're miserable as anything. And who cares if they've got 15 million in the bank? They're actually not happy or satisfied or fulfilled at all. You know, they've just got money there. And they, you know, the quality of their life starts to decrease because they've lost their meaning. So I think when I hear things like that, I'm like, crap, that's just a number. It's just money, like to a degree, of course. Of course it matters. But it's like, you know, money doesn't necessarily make you happy. Podcast downloads doesn't necessarily make you happy either. I think it's really about the connection that you have with your audience. I think it's the quality of information and, you know, stuff that you're bringing to your audience. I think that matters way more than the number. So I kind of see things in scales. Yes, be aware of your numbers, but don't be totally obsessive over them, and hit that sweet spot in the middle where it's like you're aware of them, they're growing, you're still showing up, you're doing your thing, but don't obsess and fixate on them like I did. It doesn't help you in the long run. And to be
well,
honest with you, you still feel the same whether you have 1,000 downloads, 100 downloads, or 16,000 downloads. You're still the same person essentially, but you're just getting better as time goes on. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
important.
I did the same mistake too when I launched a podcast. You know, when I launched a podcast, the day after that, I will check my statistic all day long, hoping that it will, go up
Increase.
really tremendously. So
Totally.
yeah, yeah, I kind of feel really relatable with your situation back then. So
Yeah,
do not
it's
get
like
obsessed,
fixated,
right?
isn't it? We want
Yeah.
that. I think what we're looking for is like proof that our podcasting is quote unquote working. Like we want to know that it's, you know, reaching more people, getting the downloads, building and increasing in that. But at the same time, I think we're looking for external validation as well, because it's like if we have the numbers there, then we can feel like the podcaster. You know, we can feel like we're
Mm,
credible. We can feel like, we're worth it, I guess, in a sense as well. We're worth listening to. And to be honest with you, it's better to get in the energy of pretending, or not pretending, but like in the energy of your higher self. So it's like knowing that it doesn't matter what the actual downloads are. If you're showing up and you're serving people and you're helping in some capacity, the numbers don't matter because they will just naturally rise with you.
mm. Okay,
Yeah.
so do not be obsessed. Don't focus on number, and just focus on quality. All right.
Yeah, but I would
So,
recommend being aware of it because some podcasters don't even know their stats. And I think that's a mistake I made too in the beginning. I didn't even pay for the Libsyn account that told me how many downloads I had. I just didn't care. And then after about 10 episodes, I was like, I wonder if anyone's actually listening to this. And so I was like, I'll just upgrade and pay for the account that tells me. So I think that's a good place to be in, a good space to be in, where you're aware of your numbers, but you're not obsessed over them.
okay. So when is the right time to be aware of the numbers and not totally get obsessed? How do we kind of separate between that?
Yes, very good question. I think when you're starting to catch yourself and you're going, I wonder what my numbers are, and you look them up and then you get disappointed, that is a telltale sign that you're investing way too much. Like you're wanting way too much validation that your podcast is getting reach and growing and stuff like that. So it's kind of like if you think about your money, for example,
Mhm.
if you get really obsessed with money and you put all your eggs in one basket and say, well, when I get this amount of money, then I'm going to do this thing, or when I get this amount of money, then I'm going to be happy, or when I get this amount of money, then I'm going to focus on getting a relationship, or it's basically putting things off until you get that number. And that's the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a difference between being aware of your money and where money's going to, and your debt, or, your assets and your investments and whatever, right? Your paychecks and all that. There's a difference around measuring it and being aware of it, and then also kind of getting obsessed with it and fixating on it completely and just focusing on that and everything else being put on hold. So I think when you're starting to get disappointed by your downloads, that's a telltale sign that you're starting to invest too much focus on your downloads. But at the same time, it's like if you're only getting one download a month or something, that's like really ridiculously low. So to me, that tells me that this particular podcaster, for example, would need some help with their marketing strategy and their promoting strategy as well for their podcast, because you can have the best podcast in the world, you can have the best intentions, you can rock up and have excellent energy and amazing information and great conversations that are entertaining as fuck. But it's like, if you don't know how to share that with people, it's like, it's just going to sit there. No one's going to hear it. It's not going to get out there. It's not going to get into people's ears. And then you really start to get frustrated because you're like, whoa, I've just like spent all these hours on this, setting this up and creating my episodes and having these cool people on, but no one's listening. Why not? So that would tell me then that there's a marketing problem.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so I still try to comprehend that because it's kind of hard for some people to separate into that. And you mentioned that only focus on the number when it's in the marketing space. Is that what you mean?
I think it's if you're starting to look at your numbers and you're starting to feel upset, depressed, discouraged, that's when you need to take a step back and go, why am I feeling like this? And usually we feel like that because we're trying to get that validation, right? Of like, we're feeling worthy because people are downloading our podcast and listening to us. Do you know what I mean? It fills our significance cup. So I think in terms of getting to that sweet spot on the scales, right? Because you've got like the obsessed over your numbers and your statistics and analytics, and you're checking it every day and you're getting discouraged and upset and frustrated and annoyed and sad. And then you've got the no awareness of your numbers at all. And you don't even know where your podcast sits. You don't know what your point of difference is. You don't know, anything. It's like you're talking into the oblivion and just hoping that people listen. These are two really unhealthy spaces to be in. So you want to be balancing it out here. So I think the first thing to do is ask yourself, what do the numbers give me? That's the most important thing. Does it give you significance so you feel important and worthy? Is it the fact that you're wanting to get certain sponsorships and you want to reach an X amount of downloads so that you have some credibility that you can pitch to companies and sponsors and stuff? What are the numbers actually going to give you? Is it, once you reach 5,000 downloads, you can ask that guest to be on your podcast? A lot of people don't actually know what their numbers give them or what their goals and intentions are for their podcast. And so they tend to get upset and discouraged, but it's like, well, why? Like, if you're loving it, if you love podcasting, right, and you know that you're doing things to put it out there for people to listen to it, then that's great. That's a wonderful space to be in because you're really in that flow state.
Okay, so it all came down to the intentions, and it all based on the passion, how how high passion with your podcast. And
Yeah.
I remember I watched videos from JLD. Are you familiar with it? JLD, John Lee
No,
Dumas from EO Fire. Okay.
I've never seen it.
Okay. So I watched the videos that he gave uh, at at the presentation, I believe in Orlando. So he gave this presentation about growing a podcast, and at the end of the presentation, he told the audience that um, do not focus on getting bigger, but focus on getting better. So I was like, okay, that was quite mind blown because because people tends to focus on getting bigger, bigger and bigger. They do all this promotional stuff, but they don't really know how their podcasts go, how their sound like, how their interview style like. So yeah, that's really amazing.
It's
It
a
kind
great
of
quote. I've heard that
yeah.
before. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've heard that quote.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I remember his name. But yes, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, because if it's getting better and better, then people are going to want to keep listening and become a loyal listener and then want to know more of what you've got to say and consume more and recommend it to people and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing with getting better is that people that listen to it will promote it for you. But if you get bigger, you are the one who do the work. So I think
Yeah.
that's how to different between the two.
I agree. And
Okay.
like, if the listeners are listening to this, like even just like right now, as anyone's listening, is like write down that question. instead of getting bigger, how can I get better? So like, how can you show up better and more powerfully as a podcast host? Maybe it's like, for example, sharing more information. So a lot of podcasters, especially business owners, are really scared to really provide really high value information for free because they think, well, crap, this is what people normally pay me for. Why am I just giving it away for free on my podcast? But it's like, if you're in that energy of abundance, then people are going to want to learn because they're like, oh, that podcast host gives us so much value. And it's happened to me too. Like Angie Lee, the Angie Lee show, she gives some great marketing advice and she's high energy and she's fun. And I love learning that way. And so that's why I kept listening to her podcast, because she kept giving these tips on how to grow your business on Instagram and this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, but in like a fun way, not like a boring, dry way. And she didn't hold back. So I was like, wow, I actually trust that she's really delivering and really cares for me, even though she doesn't know who the hell I am. Well, she does now, but back then she didn't. And so I think that's a really important thing too, is like actually ask yourself, how can I get better? And I recorded a podcast episode yesterday for the new year to come out on the 1st of January. And there were some of the questions that I asked my audience was like, how can you make your podcast better in 2021? How can you be more creative? How can you communicate more clearly? How can you speak an authentic and aligned message so that you're showing up as your authentic self, not who you think you should, who you think you should be, to make people download your podcast.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now that they know the mistakes and how to separate between the two, and now how about we go into the step-by-step process that you have done so far to grow your podcast to 15,000 downloads per month. And now you said before the interview, you said it was 16,000, okay, and still growing. Wow.
So it's not, just to clarify, it's not 15,000 downloads per month. It's 16,500 downloads in total over the last 2 years.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, but still, it's a big number for the whole year.
Yeah. So not mislead people.
Okay. So how did you grow from? When did you start feeling like, okay, I need to grow my podcast to whatever number it is? So when did you feel that?
Well, when I first started back in December 2018, I had no listeners. I had 0 listeners. I had 0 downloads. I didn't have a following. I wasn't famous. I wasn't well known. I started everything from scratch. Literally, like, quote unquote, was a nobody. Do you know what I mean? So it was a lot because I didn't know if my podcast would be successful. I didn't know if people were going to listen. I didn't know if they'd download it. I didn't know if people would hate it. I didn't know if I'd get, trolled online. I didn't know any of that stuff, right? So it takes a lot of self-belief and, I guess, determination to keep going and build it. So, I'm not at 15,000 downloads yet per month, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
So I think the thing is, so just to go back to your question was, how did I grow it? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So what I did was, initially I did like the first 5 to 10 episodes, not knowing my statistics, not knowing if people were listening, just being driven purely by passion, basically just knowing that I had a story to share. I had things to share with people. Like, I had learned so much that I couldn't possibly hold it in just to myself and then it might never go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Because I knew that what I had to share was stuff that the general population needed educating on and didn't really know about. And now narcissism is like a word that's thrown around all the time and everyone basically knows what it's about, so that's amazing. So I think the thing is that I think after around the 10th episode, I was like, well, I don't know if my podcast is going anywhere. I don't know if it's working. I feel like I'm talking into the abyss, into the oblivion. I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like, is it actually making a difference? Yeah. And is anyone actually listening to me? Do you know what I mean? Am I wasting my time? All of these thoughts start to go through your head. You start to doubt yourself so much. And that's when I was like, well, I need to get a snapshot of where I'm at. And I also need to have an idea of where I want to go. Because if I don't know where I want to go, then I can't possibly measure. I can't pull myself there. Or do you know what I mean? Like, I can't, if I don't know where I'm heading, then how am I going to know when I've reached it, And all these things started popping up. So I was like, okay, cool. My goal is to get 1 listener. That was my very first goal. And then once I got the statistics and paid for that premium thing, that's when I was like, oh, wow, I actually have a couple of 100 downloads. Whoa, like, that really blew my mind, right? Because I just thought I'd have 0 or maybe just a couple of 10 episodes. And that was really encouraging to me. I was like, well, I think I had like 153, maybe 200 and something. But it was a lot more than what I was expecting. So I was like, whoa, okay, if I've done that already, what can I do next? Like, how can I double that? And so that's when I started to get a bit more strategic about things. And that's when I started bringing people on as a guest on my podcast, because I realized that I'd shared my story now. And I was like, well, I don't know what else to share now. So I better bring people on who do know a bit more than me. And then I brought, them on. And then before I knew it, they were sharing it with people. And then other people were listening in and all of this. And it started to build from there. So having guests on your podcast that also share and market that episode really does help to build your audience, because you tap into different audiences as well. And then I think it was kind of like, great, so I've made over 100 downloads. Now the next step is, 500 downloads, then 1,000 downloads, then 1,500 downloads, and then 2,000 downloads. And it was just like in increments. And I was celebrating along the way. That's the other thing too, because I'd learned in my life coaching diploma that your brain needs rewards. Otherwise, if you don't acknowledge it and you don't give yourself a pat on the back, no one's going to do it for you, right? Especially before you even have any results. And so I started doing that. I started celebrating, treating myself to a movie, buying myself this at the shops, whatever to make myself feel good and go, yeah, I did it. I got to 1,000 downloads, and then 10,000 downloads, I paid for like a float session. There's like this thing you can do. You can float in this Himalayan salt type of water thing and this like little pod hub thing, and I was like, I want to try that, so I'm just going to pay for it and see how it goes as like a celebration and all of these things. So I celebrated along the way, and it started to feel really good because I wasn't waiting to be discovered. I wasn't waiting to be told your podcast is great. I had to give myself that validation first. And then after that, got super strategic. So I was like, okay, cool. What can I do to harness social media to get my podcast out there? Because I know that it's good. I know I've had great guests. Now that I know that the solid stuff is there, how do I actually reach the people that I need to reach? Because I've reached that one listener, that's already happened. I've gotten a couple of downloads, a couple of 100 downloads, a couple of 1,000 downloads. What's next? So then, I had to keep setting goals along my journey. And if you don't have any goals, as I said, you've got nothing to work towards, or if you haven't done any setting, like intention setting, then it's like, you kind of are directionless and you're lost, and it's like the blind leading the blind. So my next goal now is to get to 20,000 downloads before Easter next year, and then 30,000 downloads by Christmas next year, if not more. That's like as a minimum, energetic minimum. So then I started creating audiograms. Does your audience know about audiograms?
Audiograms? Oh yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah,
With the graph thingy, yeah.
That's my number one favorite marketing strategy. If it wasn't for audiograms, there's no way in hell I'd be at 16,500 downloads. There's just no way. Having that visual graphic there to appeal to the visual learners, having the auditory component of having your voiceover in the background, having the text or subtitles on the screen pop up so people can read it when they're, at work or whatever they're not meant to be doing. Having to appeal to all the different types of learners is really important. And sharing that to social media. So really having the guts and the confidence to share your stuff and believe in it. Because if you do, energetically, you'll call other people into your reality and your podcasting world that will believe in it as well.
So what you did so far is you get you get a guest to be interviewed, and then you promote it on social media by doing the audiograms. Okay.
Yes,
so
and
how long is
posts.
your audiogram usually? And post,
60
okay.
seconds.
So 3 ways you did.
Yes. Yeah, I treat each episode like a launch. So a lot of podcasters don't share their work enough online. They just don't. And they're really like missing a lot of real estate out there because they're scared to do it. They don't want to feel exposed and vulnerable, and they don't want to feel like or be perceived like they're arrogant or tooting their own horn or self-promoting and all of these things. But usually it's our own insecurities that get in the way. Other people aren't, like the right people for us aren't thinking that about us. You know what I'm saying? Audiograms, and I also create posts. So just say you're just a podcast, not just a podcaster, just say you're a podcaster without a business, for example, and you're podcasting for the fun of it, for the passion, for the purpose behind it, but it's not to make any money. It's not to do any of that sort of stuff, right? Sharing to social media is imperative. Yeah. So actually writing posts about that episode or leaving them on a bit of a cliffhanger and go, in this episode, I explain the 5 different ways to, I don't know, make protein cookies that'll help mums lose the baby weight around their bellies or something like that, right? The first 3 are this, the other 2 are shared on my podcast. Go check it out, at the full episode or whatever. But obviously a little bit more to it than just that, actually hooking people's attention in and then directing them to the podcast. So actually having a call to action from your social media posts to get them to go listen to the full episode.
Okay, so you did two things first before you even interview people. I mean, before you bring a guest on your show, what you did is you post on social media and then you create an audiogram and you post it
Yeah.
on the story. All right,
Yeah.
that's
And feed
awesome.
as well. Yeah.
Okay, so how often do you interview guests? Maybe
Ooh.
I mean, like, is it once a week or?
I'm not that structured, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
I've realized that structure, I'm good with half structure, but not full structure. So for me, it's not about having to get a guest every week or fortnight or every month. It's more about, is that person right for my audience or not? That's what it really comes down to. So
Uh,
some weeks I'll have like 2 or 3 interviews and then I won't have any for like a month. It's really sporadic, but I do kind of, I batch my podcast episodes. So like I share an episode a week. I'm wanting to increase that as well as my long-term goal. I'd love to podcast 2 or 3 times a week, to be honest with you, but we'll get there.
mhm,
Yeah, so I spread it out basically, and I have solo episodes as well as interview guests, but only the right ones for my show. I've had to say no to a couple of people because I'm like, that's just they haven't come to me with an idea or a theme for the episodes. Then I've got to sit there and go, how could they fit my show? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So I think a good piece of advice is, if you're wanting to pitch yourself to be a guest on someone else's show, come to them with an idea of what that episode could be about. Come to them with an idea of what you could speak on and educate their audience on, so that the podcast host isn't sitting there going, I don't see how this is going to work. Like, I don't see how, like, I don't know what kind of value you're going to bring. So the answer is kind of no.
mhm,
And I know one of my goals for 2021 is to not interview as many people, but actually be interviewed by more people. Like, as I said,
mhm,
I'd love to have a podcast agency and sign up with them so that I could be a guest once a week on different shows for like 12 months. I'd love that.
mhm, mhm. And what kind of guest are you looking for? Just in case if someone is interested to interview you, or maybe having you in their show. Wait, yeah. Of
Yeah, that's a really
guests
good
are you looking
question.
for?
Yep. So,
Yeah.
as I said, I'm not really looking for guests right now, but when they have happened, it's been so my podcast is not just about starting a podcast, it's about building a podcast. It's about creating global positive change socially, culturally, in different ways. It's about people actually becoming more self-expressed, because as a society, and through my life coaching practice, I can see a lot of people actually living very suppressed lives where they don't feel like they can speak up or speak on things or share their stories, and not really realize the power of their voice. People just don't really realize how powerful their voices are in their stories. When you get out of school, and even before school, like, everyone has a story somewhere. Everyone's been affected by something in their life, and everyone can inspire others in some capacity. Just getting through a hard time can inspire someone else that's going through a hard time. So for my podcast, I'm going down, like, there are quite a few podcasts about well, actually, there's not that many now that I think about it, but there are podcasts that are about podcasting, and that's great. I've just found that a lot of them are about the technical side of things, because they're editors, they're podcast editors that have their own podcast about podcasting, and it's all
Mhm,
very technical, logical, rational sort of stuff, which is great, because we need that strategy, we need all of that, right brain sort of stuff. My kind of point of difference is more about mindset, because I'm a life coach, and energy, the importance of your energy when you rock up for an episode. It's also about like spirituality, because I feel like I'm being guided a lot of the time, in my business and in my podcast. And not a lot of people connect with that, but the right people do. Do you know what I mean? Around, trusting, that you're saying the right things in the right way, and that you know enough, and, that it's going to reach the right people. And like, there are things that have happened for me in my podcast and business that I just can't explain. Like, I literally can't go, yep, because of that I got this result. Like, sometimes things just pop up out of nowhere, and once your podcast starts to get known and recommended and stuff, these things just start to happen, that just reach out and go, hey, I heard about you, I listened to your podcast, I'd love to chat, or I'd love to do this, or join your group. And you're like, I don't even know who you are, but cool, come along. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, for me, if I was going to have a guest on, it would have to be someone that's an expert in their field, that can educate my audience on something that I can't or isn't my zone of genius. Something that is podcast related, or self-expression, or throat chakra, throat center from human design. that sort of thing. And for me to be a guest on other people's podcasts, I'd love to be on podcasts that are about marketing and entrepreneurialism and how podcasting can help their businesses. And, because for me, if I think and reflect back on my journey, I really didn't know what my voice was back in 2018. Like I
Mm,
actually didn't know. I was scared to speak in a sense. I was scared to speak up. Like I had dreams and nightmares that my ex would hear the podcast, and I never gave his name away. I called him Hugo to protect his confidentiality. I had dreams that he came and murdered me in my sleep, and burnt my house down because I was scared that he would think that I was defaming him in some way. And that was never my intention. It was just to help other people going through a similar journey as myself. And, I think for me to be on other podcasts, like it's got to be around, that emotional connection with people too, not just these are the 3 steps to have a successful podcast. It's part of it, but it's also like, as you can probably tell from this interview, I've talked a lot about how I've felt and thought in the past and how I feel and think differently now, and like recommend how those little mental health, like mental tweaks and tricks and hacks can actually change a huge outcome in your podcast too.
mhm. Okay, so you're looking for guests that are good at areas that are you're not good at, maybe like spiritual and mindset. And wait, you want a mindset guest? I mean, you already are a life coach yourself, so um, I think mindset coach is not your. I don't know what kind of mindset coach do you want. I mean, I've got a lot of mindset guests these days, and I have to say no because I already interviewed people like that. That
Yeah.
so okay.
So are you wanting more guests that are more about strategy?
Ah, okay, awesome. Okay.
I think the thing too is like, I think so. As I said, like I'm not really looking for guests for my podcast at the moment, right now. Do you know what I mean? But like I'm looking at being a guest on other podcasts, just because
I
getting that word
guess.
out there and spreading my message. Because I'm already doing that on my podcast, and if someone can bring in incredible value, then I'll bring them on. But like it's usually after we've come up with a topic or an idea, because I've got one woman who I want to interview next year, and her whole business, and she's hugely successful, is about helping women speak up in the workplace. And I've had issues
Mm,
like that in the past, and I'm very curious about what tips and words and phrasing she would use in order to speak up in a meeting and go, actually no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do it this way, or whatever the case may be. So that's the sort of stuff that I find really interesting. So yeah.
awesome. So okay, what if someone really big want to be on your show? Because to me, you want to have a guest that is the right fit. But what if someone is big but not necessarily the right fit? Would you still take them?
I guess it depends. So I reached out to someone from Big Brother that I have. You guys heard of Big Brother before over in where you're
No,
at? Oh, okay.
no.
So it's a really big reality TV show over here in
Oh,
Australia and
Big
America.
Brother is a TV show.
Yeah, a reality
Okay.
TV show. And
Okay.
I really wanted to have this particular woman on my podcast because I was like, whoa, I think she would fit great. Like she talks about being a queen, and I'm like, become a podcast queen, and I loved her
Mm,
energy. But when I actually thought about it, I was like, there's really no particular thing that I want to educate her, like my audience on. It's more just about, it was just kind of going to be like, hey, cool, I've got her from Big Brother on my podcast, but it didn't really serve my audience when I thought about it. Do you know what I mean? Because what was she going to teach my audience? It wasn't really aligned. Whereas, I'll definitely take on someone that may not be high profile celebrity or that big or famous, that has a really important message for my audience that I know they're going to love, or a message they need to hear that's going to help them in some way, educate or entertain them or whatever. So I think just because you're high profile and famous doesn't always mean that you're right, that they're going to be right for, your audience necessarily.
that's a great reminder actually, because uh, people don't really people can't relate with the high profile guests mostly. And if you take someone who is kind of someone who is close to them, maybe they can relate. It's all about the message, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it really is.
yeah, I remember the Pat Flynn. Do you familiar with Pat Flynn?
No.
Okay. So Pat Flynn is the host of Smart Passive Income, and I remember he mentioned that he has interviewed someone like Gary Vee and who's another one? Tim Ferriss. Okay, Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss. He has
Love.
interviewed those people, and he also has interviewed one of his students who took on his course. And you know what happened after that? The episode where he interviewed the students has way more download than the episode where he interviewed those two combined. So I thought,
Interesting.
and the reason because of that, the reason why the download got so high is because the student is more relatable to the audience than Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss. So
Yes.
yeah.
I love that. And it's just a great example of how just because someone's got a reputation doesn't actually mean that they're going to, be the right aligned guest for your show or bring the goods, like, and that's the thing. A lot of famous high profile people aren't always relatable to like the average, not average, but like the non-famous people. Do you know what I mean? Because they have a whole different life,
Uh-huh.
different lifestyle, sets of problems. Everything
Mm.
can be so different, And I think a lot of people
Mhm.
do focus on just getting famous people or high profile people on their podcast because it's great bragging rights. And in a sense,
Mm.
yes, it is. But it's like at the end of the day, how is that really going to help your audience? Like if you bring someone famous on, but they have nothing that's going to help their audience, they've got no incentive to listen. They're just kind of like, yeah, cool, Olivia interviewed, I don't know, it's Gary Vee. Do you know what I mean? But like, I know that Gary Vee would have
Yeah.
a lot of value to bring, so that wouldn't really worry me. But you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, so okay, so we have talked about all things, how to grow, the mistakes, and how to separate the two between the obsessed and what is it, another one, and
Not be aware, not like
uh,
ignorant to your downloads.
okay, now into the downloads. Okay, so we have talked about that so far. So what's your now that you have reached a level that is so high up there, and what kind of challenge do you face in this level? Because to me, I haven't reached that yet, so I'm kind of curious, like what kind of challenge do you are you facing right now?
Yeah, well, I just don't really even see myself as being like up here. Like it's once again, I don't know. It's just like a number. Like I don't know. I still feel like me. Like I don't. Yeah, it's weird. Like even when because I'd love to get like 50,000 downloads, but like even when I get to that
Okay.
level, it's like I don't know. I don't see myself as being that different or better. But just having been at it longer, just having that grit to keep going and to keep being consistent. That's a really big one. Like consistency really is key. But I think what do I struggle with now? I think it's about now that I'm continuously up leveling my podcast. This is something that I think everyone should do as well. Like you want to be up leveling all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't want to get stagnant and plateau. You want to keep building it and keep growing it and making it better, not necessarily bigger. Um,
Yeah.
so important. So I think
Yeah.
the struggle at the moment is like, for me, in a sense, like compared to a lot of other podcasters, my podcast is still quite small. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
16,500 downloads might seem like a crap ton to someone that's got like 20, but we all
Wait,
start
compared to your
somewhere.
brother's podcast?
Sorry?
Compared to your brother's podcast, you mean?
I don't have a brother that has a podcast. I have a brother, but he hasn't. Well, actually, no, he does have a podcast, but he's never released any
Oh.
episodes.
Oh wow.
I know, it's so different. Yeah, so like I think for me, the struggle back in the day was how do I start this thing? How do I get it up and running? How do I reach people? How do I interview? How do I have a brand? How do I do all these things? And now that I know a lot of that stuff, as I said, I've rebranded 4 times now. So it's had to be relearned in a whole new way each time I've, pivoted and changed niches. But now it's more kind
Mhm.
of like, now I feel like this level of pressure in a sense of like, okay, cool, I have these results now. Now people have expectations. Like they expect, me to be a certain way or whatever. Like I remember I had an interview a month or 2 ago now. And the lady was like, I actually know her outside of podcasting, but she was like, we jumped on and I just show how imperfect, I am sometimes because I have a nasal drip and sometimes I get thirsty and get dry lips. And, here I am drinking a bottle of water halfway through and putting lip gloss on. And she's like, she got to the end of the episode. And when we stopped recording, she's like, oh my God, like, I know you said that you're the podcast queen, but I never expected you to take a drink of water and interrupt the episode. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I love that. I'm like, yeah, we're just human. So I think it's just dealing with that pressure and expectations. I think that's one that's popping up for me recently. I think the other thing too is like people expect you to be the perfect speaker, and it's just not true. Like even through this episode, you've probably heard me say and smack my lips and go and things like that speakers that are like voice coaches and stuff say that you should be doing. But I think I think my big message is really just let people know you don't have to be perfect to podcast, and that's a good thing because it makes you more relatable to people. I think the other thing too is like, if I think about what I struggle with, I think one thing that I do struggle with, this is probably like a bit of a silly one, but I have so much information that I want to share that just releasing one episode a week just is not enough. Like sometimes when I'm away, I know some people sit there and they struggle trying to think of stuff to talk about. I have the opposite problem now because I know my audience so well and my ideal listener. I'm like, how do I ever get enough content out there? And so I think in the future, what I want to do is hire like a copywriter, because I write all my own content. All of my social media posts I create for myself. But I'd love to just focus on podcasting and just do like 3 episodes a week and pay someone to write all of my social media posts for me in my voice, in a sense. So yeah, that's probably my next struggle.
Okay, so first off, I want to say that struggle is a good struggle because you have so many contents. You just need to brainstorming it. Okay, while me on the other hand, I need one day to brainstorm everything and then just record it. The day after that. So yeah, we're gonna have an opposite problem.
I used to have that. Don't worry, you're not alone with that.
Okay. So now that you have a podcast for almost 3 years now, so do you have any haters? That put hate comments on your show. I don't know. Have you dealt with one?
So yes and no. So firstly, my podcast has just turned 2, so I've got another year until it turns 3. So it's not so much my podcast actually. I remember the day that I released or announced that I was helping people with narcissism, right? Because I wasn't technically certified at that point, but I was going to start building my audience and get a head start on things and sharing things and put stuff out there. The very first day I put my first post up, I got the worst, most scathing email, or actually it was an Instagram message from this psychotherapist or something over in England. And oh my God, it was so awful. I was like, whoa, this is really hateful. Like, I was like, she doesn't even know who I am. Like, how can she say these things about me, And that was really hard because I had just dipped my toe in the water of like the crazy online space. And it takes a lot of guts and courage to kind of put yourself out there, especially in the beginning. And when I got that was like not the first response, but in the first 24 hours, because like 99% of feedback was great. I had people saying, well done, you finally come out with it, you've finally taken the plunge. Yes, I can relate to this, good job. But that one really horrible message that went on for like pages on Instagram in the Messenger, I was like, crap, I don't think I've done the right thing. Maybe I should just shut this all down and retreat back into my little introverted cave, And luckily at the time I had a really good friend that I could talk to who basically, helped with my mindset around that and worked through that. And I actually haven't had anything that bad since then, but I'm sure that there probably are things out there. And I know that there will come a time where that'll happen, because you look at people like Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins and Oprah, they're always going to have haters or people that don't like them. Even like Taylor Swift or Kate Middleton. Like Kate Middleton's never put a foot wrong, but people hate her for being too perfect. So it's like, you really can't please everyone.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
One day I'm sure I'll get a bad review, and so fucking be it. Like, if you don't like it, don't listen. Like, it's really that simple. And for the people that do like it and listen, welcome aboard and let's keep going together. You know what I mean? And it's taken a while to get that thick skin because I am really quite sensitive. So yeah, if you're like me, just don't let it stop you, because you're never going to please every single person out there. But the right ones will appreciate you stepping forward and sharing your message and podcasting, because it'll be for them. It's not going to be for the haters or the trolls or criticizers or judges.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that people have when growing a podcast is having haters, and the thing is they don't really know how to deal with that, and you say that just ignore it, but what if people can't ignore it?
I have the perfect line. You want to hear it? I have the perfect
Okay,
line.
let's go.
So if someone writes a bad review or sends you a message or something like that and criticizes you and says, I don't like your podcast, or you were wrong to say this, or whatever, right? Instead of ignoring it, because a lot of people ignore it because it is hard to face and they're scared that it might be true. So you've got to take that on for a second. It's like, is what this person's saying true? Was I overly harsh or too blunt or whatever the criticism might be? Or maybe, they've called you a fence sitter or too diplomatic or whatever, right? It doesn't matter what it is, to be honest with you, at the end of the day. First, try that on and go, is that true? And is it really true? Is it just what that person thinks? And now I feel that way, right? So that's the first thing. There might be some truth to it. And if that's the case, it's actually good feedback to get back and you can work on as part of your, personal development, because we're always going through that, as we grow and evolve and develop. But the perfect line to that is actually, thank you for your feedback. That's it.
Wow. That is so positive.
Thank you for your feedback. You don't have to take the
Okay,
feedback
I like
on.
that. I like that.
It doesn't mean they're right. Yeah, it doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that you have to do what they've said. You just say, thank you for your feedback. And you can decide whether you want to take that feedback on or if you just want to leave it in that message and never look at it again.
That is so awesome. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, because you're not feeding into their drama. If you try and defend yourself, it spirals out of control. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like they just want to prove that they're right. You want to defend yourself because you feel attacked, and then you give in to the negative energy around it all. And at the end of the day, like most people, this is another thing. I don't know who said this, but someone famous, probably like Gary Vee, was like, those that are ahead of you will not criticize you. You know what I mean? Like the people that are ahead of you and they have good intentions, they want to bring you up to their level. They want to help you and support you and nurture you and cultivate that, because they know that it's more than just, that one thing. They know that there's, like, when you're a podcaster, you are a game changer because your voice does have ripple effects across the world. You just don't know who's listening. You really don't. Like, I had my hair cut by a hairdresser before my 30th birthday, and I just got chatting to her. I'd never been to that hairdresser before. I was just sitting in the chair and I was in a good mood that morning, and I was like, hey, how's it going? Just got to chit chat, and I was like, how's coronavirus affected you? And she gave me her whole life story in, an hour, and she's like, I broke up with my partner and this, that, and the other, and he was a bit toxic for me. And I was like, oh, he wouldn't happen to be a bit narcissistic, would he? And she's like, oh my God, that word, yes. And then we got chatting, and then it turned out she recommended to me a podcast. She's like, you've got to listen to this podcast. She talks all about things narcissism. And it turned out to be my friggin' podcast. She couldn't believe it. That's crazy, right? Someone in my local area didn't know who I was from a bar of soap, had never looked me up on social media or online, didn't know what I looked like, and she was cutting my hair. So you just don't know who's listening. And the fact that she recommended to me my own podcast, I'll never forget that. That was like an unforgettable moment. I'm like, that's my podcast.
Yeah,
like,
how did he not know that he's cutting your hair, the host's hair,
Yeah, because I had a logo. Sorry?
Did he not see your face? Or
it was actually a she, and back at my very first podcast, I didn't show my face. That was another mistake. So I didn't have a photo of myself. There was no obvious, because I was going to have the podcast as an anonymous thing. I didn't want to tell people who I was because I was scared of that backlash. I was scared of judgment. Like, I really struggled with that. Like, it took me 6 months to even start my podcast. So I get the fear of being judged. I get the fear of, people hating on you and all that sort of stuff. I get that 100%, and I struggled with that for a long time. And so back then, for my podcast cover art, it wasn't my face. It was actually a drawing.
Yeah, I remember I saw that.
Yeah, so she didn't know who I was, but I would have thought she would have recognized my voice, but clearly she didn't.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And hopefully that episode changed her life. Is it a she or he? Okay, it's a she.
Yeah,
okay,
she.
hopefully.
Yeah, she's on her own healing and recovery journey. So that was really cool, hearing more about that. And we could relate to each other in a whole new way, because it wasn't like she had to educate me on narcissism. It was like she had learnt from me. So we knew we were on the same page. Like, we knew where we were both at with that. And she was telling me more of her story. And I was kind of sharing with her what she could expect, for the next stage of healing, because there's 4 different stages and stuff. And so she really appreciated that. So in a sense, I paid for a haircut, but I kind of gave a coaching session as well.
Nice. 2 in 1.
Yeah.
and it's nice that you met your listeners face to face. I never met one face to face like that. So
yeah, that's crazy. Monday you might. You never know. You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, I know them virtually. I know their social media, but I never met them. They are all, far reach from my place. So,
Yeah, most of them will
and
be virtual.
plus, yeah, and plus, podcasting is mainly for United State people, American people, and I'm from Malaysia, so it's kind
Yeah.
of hard.
Apparently, the most, so I don't know if you've looked at the stats, but there's actually the most, so Americans do consume podcasts a lot for sure, but
Yeah.
the country that is actually ahead of America is Korea.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's new.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of Koreans, they actually consume more podcasts than Americans.
I thought Korean is more into reality shows, so I thought they are more into YouTube.
Maybe they could be
Never
into all
thought.
that too. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Right. So I think we are close to the end today. So what's the final takeaway that our listeners can really get from our chat here?
I think so. I think the thing is, like, don't get me wrong, strategy on podcasting is essential. It's like really, really important. But what's more important than that is actually your mindset and your energy. And have you ever had those people that have like this incredible energy about them and you just happen to be drawn to them like a moth to a flame? You just want to be in their aura, you want to be around them. If you show up
Yeah.
as that person, like the person that you really truly are, right? And you're in that amazing energy and you come to podcasting and record in that energy when you're taking inspired action, like just say you're really feeling like fired up to talk about this thing or that thing, or you're really in the mood to actually spill your guts out onto your podcast or channel your inner message or whatever, those episodes tend to do a lot better than the ones where you've really sat down there and put a lot of thought into it and all that real masculine energy where you're like this structure and that thing and then I'm going to say that next or read that script
Hmm.
word for word. When you're forcing yourself to do a podcast episode, they just don't, I found for me anyway, they just don't tend to do as well. But those ones that might be totally unplanned, but I just feel like totally in flow that day and I could just talk my ass off, those episodes do really well, like they get more
Uh-huh.
downloads, they're easier to share, people connect with it more. And that's the power of energy as well, So I think that's a really understated part of podcasting that people don't realize. And I think too, one other little tip I will give, and this is probably part of my life coaching training, is when you are up on your podcast like you're in a soapbox, but when you're speaking into your podcast or speaking to your listeners, have an ideal listener in mind. So have an idea of trying to get into the head or the mind of your ideal listener, in the lives of those people as well. Because when you truly understand them, they feel heard. And that's what really builds that trust and intimacy and connection. Like what happened with me with Cara, the first podcast I listened to, the first podcast host I connected with, I felt like she truly got me. And that's why I kept
Hmm.
showing up and re-listening and binging and listening for hours upon hours and then following her on social media and then buying off her as well. That's what happens when you really build an amazing connection with your audience. And that really happens as well when, yes, you share a part of yourself and your life and your lessons and whatever, but then you also make the episode about them. So get them to reflect on themselves, ask them questions, even though it's a rhetorical one because no one's physically answering you back. Get them to start thinking about those things so that they don't just sit there and listen to you rattle on for like half an hour or 15 minutes or an hour or something like that, like actually highlight to them, even subconsciously, what the episode is doing for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so two things here. Bring a personality into the show and know your ideal listeners, right?
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm kind of curious. Do you have a a routine before doing an interview? Maybe some habits like me myself. I would usually listen to other podcasts to bring their energy into mine. So yeah, I
Oh,
tend to listen to a podcast that have high energy like that. So
nice.
do
Like,
you
do
do
you
you
feel
have?
ready for it?
Yeah,
I love that. That's really cool. Like Gary Vee or someone that's like,
yeah, kind of like
yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah, do
cool.
you have a routine before doing interview?
I do have a routine. This is where the structure
Wow.
comes in, I guess. So
Ah.
I'm going to be really practical with you guys right now. So I go to the toilet. right? Because I do not have like the biggest bladder in the world and I drink a lot of water. So I go to the toilet first and then I have a glass of water because I do get a dry mouth. Like I've got a dry mouth now after talking for like an hour and a bit. So
Mm.
whenever I do get on stage one day, I'm going to need water right there for me. I also put my throat chakra oil on. I put a bit of lip gloss on, and then I plug my mic in. I usually have notes before I get started because I'm just someone that likes that level of certainty to a degree. Like as you know, before we jumped on and recorded this, you're like, is there anything else you want to know? And I'm like, nah, just ask me whatever you want because I already have an idea of what I'm going to say. Do you know what I mean? And then there's been a
Yeah.
few questions there that I wasn't prepared for, but I just trusted that I knew the answers and whatever I'd say would hopefully be helpful. So I just like to have a pen and paper close by because sometimes when someone's talking, I'll get an idea. Or even like, as you've noticed with me talking, I've unpacked all this stuff and you're like, hang on a second, let's just point out what the main takeaways were that I missed, So sometimes I do that when I actually interview people too. I'll write down little notes as they're speaking and come back to a point and expand on that further or comment on it. So having a pen and paper is helpful. Turning your phone off or on airplane mode is extremely helpful. And then I'm ready to go basically. And just be in a good energy. So whether you play some music to get into that state, like for you listen to podcasts to get you all pumped up and ready for it. Like you know the importance of energy because if you don't do that, have you noticed that the episodes are a bit different? Like maybe you're a bit more flat in your energy, or maybe you're, maybe feeling like a bit of self-doubt or nervous or something like that. Whereas when you hear that confidence and motivation from someone else, that like you absorb that and you're like, cool, let's go. Like let's take this on and roll with it.
Yeah. That the energy is really important in bringing personality, right? Do you have a specific personality that you bring whenever you want to do a podcast? Maybe like an energetic person, or what personality do you have usually?
Ooh, I don't think I have just one. So I think I don't really sit there and go, I want to interview that person because they're high vibe, or I want to interview that person because they're fun. I think just subconsciously that's probably why I want to interview them. But I think it's more like if I think back to the narcissistic space, right? Because back in that area at the time, this was 2 years ago now, there was a lot of negativity in there. There was a lot of people saying that their exes were evil and they're monsters and they don't deserve the time of day and they're, all these things. And maybe to some degree they were probably right. But I knew that for me to create positive change in that area, I couldn't get sucked into that way of thinking. I had to kind of empower them to start stepping out of that victimhood and that victim mode. So I think now when I think about bringing people onto my podcast, I really only want to have people that, I guess are positive or have a positive spin on things, because I want my listeners to walk away and go, crap, yeah, that was awesome. Or I really learned something from that and I want to come back again, or she made me feel really good about myself, and I do have the answers, or, whatever the case may be. I don't want them to walk away going like depressed about themselves or upset or discouraged or feeling like crap. Like no one wants to feel like that. We can be our own worst critics sometimes. We don't need to hear that from someone else in a podcast episode, so I want to pump them up. So I only really bring on guests that I know are going to help me with that, if that makes sense, or are that way inclined naturally, so that, when they come on, they go just naturally that way and we just seem to jive better energetically.
Wait, so you are most likely interview your clients than you say?
Sorry?
Do you? So what you said here, you how do I say this? So what you said just now is about you having a clients to be interviewed on your show. Is that right?
Not clients, guests.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you help them during the interview about
Well,
all this life coaching. Is that right?
no, not necessarily. No, it's
Oh.
more just like the people that I do bring onto the show and interview, I just make sure that we're somewhat in sync with each other, right? So like if they're going to come onto the podcast and they haven't got a good energy, or they're not, in a good energy online, then I'm probably not going to want to have them on the podcast. I want to bring on people that are positive and uplifting and empowering and inspiring, not ones that are like poor me, or victim or sad and depressing. Like I want to have positive people on there.
Okay. Okay, that got me confused there for a second. Okay.
That's
But all
okay.
good. Okay. So where can people find more about you and learn more from you?
Yeah, so obviously I have a podcast since we've talked about that for the whole time now. So my podcast is called Become a Podcast Queen, and a lot of my social media is the same. So my Instagram is called Become a Podcast Queen. I have a Facebook group called Become a Podcast Queen, the community. Yes, men are welcome there. It's just I tend to have very feminine marketing, so a lot of, I'm mostly catered to a lot of women.
Yeah,
But yeah, they're the
I'm
three
there
places.
too.
Yep, you're there. Woo, two other guys. I'm getting my
Okay.
mail. So which is pretty funny. I love that though. So yeah, that's kind of where I hang out, the three different places online. And at the moment, that's enough, to be quite honest with you. I do have an email address as well, which is oliviapowellcoaching@gmail.com. But I'll provide that for the show notes so the spelling's right.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. All right. So Olivia, thank you for sharing your ideas and insights with us. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you
And
so much for having me.
all right. And for the listeners, I'll catch you another time.